Hi, everything you should know about the Rook's endgames is packed inside in this video. I will show you main theoretical positions of Rook's endgames, main positional principles, how to win with the advantage, and how to make a draw in a position that looks really hopeless. You will definitely improve your skills in endgames after watching this video. Without saying no more, let's dive deep into the Rook's endgames. To win this position with extra pawn as white, you need to know the bridge technique. I will show you right now. So rook goes to e2 check, king d7, trying to press out the black's king, and rook e4. Very important move, because our rook will help our king to hide from all checks of black. So for example, after king d6, we already can play king f7. And after the checks that black need to do, otherwise I will just promote the pawn. It's no other choice for black. Here, rook g1, rook g4. That is the bridge, because our rook helps to hide our king and the pawn is passing anyway. And it was important to force the black king to go away from the e line because he can't touch the pawn on g7. That's the first important point. Let's go next one. If we are playing for the weak side, what is really important for us is to have the rook behind the passer of our opponent. Because from this area, we can check the king and also we can make an influence to the passer of our opponent. As well, if we will imagine some other pawns here, we can at the same time attack these pawns with this rook and stop this pawn. For example, from d2 we could be able to attack pawns on king side and still stop the pawn on d5. So the rook should be behind the passer. That's the golden rule of the Rook's endgames, which will save you lots of points, believe me. And we are ready to go forward. And here we are. That is the position that is very, very well known. And we can call this as the Philidor position. How to make a draw here as black. Really, the move is rook goes b6. It's very important to stop the white king. If we will do something like rook e1 check, it will just play king d6, and that will be absolutely winning. Later on, white will use the bridge technique that we used to speak about and basically outplay us very easily. Our king needs to go to e8, rook e8, king f7, king d7. That will be absolutely winning for white. After rook b6, we stops the king of white. So to have some new square on rank 6, white need to play d6 with the idea of king e6. And now we are making the maneuver that been invented by Vanchura Philidor in the very old times. Rook goes b1 back. And the problem of white's position is that they can't stop our checks. They can't use what we can call umbrella. So they can't hide their king with help of the pawn. Previously, after rook e1, if we will go back, white can use the umbrella technique, because now the pawn is like an umbrella to the king. It's no rain from this rook, right? In the case of rook b6, d6, rook goes b1, we will check all the time our opponent's king, and that would help us to save the draw. It's one of the most basic positions of Rook's endgames that you definitely need to know about. And we are ready to go to the next important drawish position. The next important drawing position we can state as Vanchura position. It looks like white should win with this extra pawn and the king is very far away, but it's still a draw. Because after king b5, white's trying to link the king with the pawn to make the rook free. Because if you will go something like a7, after rook a6, it's absolutely a draw. King b5, rook a1. And now, if the king comes here to protect the pawn and make the rook free, we just can do rook b1. And we will repeat our checks and then come to a1 back to stop the pawn. Only one point that in such type of positions, please don't blunder something like this. If king goes to f7, then white have rook h8 tactics. Because after rook a7, rook h7, it's absolutely winning for them. So the safe spot here would be the squares h7 and g7. So the king can go to h7 and white still can't improve the position. So that's about the a7. But white started with king b5. Check on e5. King b6, check. We need to repeat our checks. And at some moment, White king needs to go closer to the rook. Otherwise, we will just go rook f6, rook f5, and so on. But that's not helpful. Straight after this, rook f6, king f5, it looks like we don't have rook f5 anymore. But we can just play rook goes to b6. Please don't play here, because another tactics can happen with your rook f8. King f8, king f6, winning absolutely. So after rook b6, we still guarding the rank 6. So the king can't cross this rank to be closer to this pawn. Again, on a7 we just have rook a6. It's nothing to do with this. And if white's trying to play king d5 going there, back to the pawn, again we can play rook f6, repeating this stuff. After, for example, rook a7 check, we can go back, rook a8, king g7, and after king c5, rook f5, it's absolutely drawish. So this Vanchura position is also very well known and very important for you in Rook's endgames. So let's move forward to some other important Rook endgames moments. With help of this position, I want to explain you key principle of Rook endgame, the long side and the short side. After Rook goes to a1 in this position, which is perfectly correct move, we need to state that our king is staying on the short side because it's only 3 squares from the pawns, and our rook should stay on the long side, 4 squares from the pawn. That's a golden rule of protection. The rook should be on the long side, the king should be on the short side. It gives maximum chances for you. That you definitely need to know this theoretical rule. I think that now we are ready to go to discuss some practical stuff of Rook's endgames. This is one of my favorite examples that basically shows us the spirit of Rook's endgames. It looks like white should be better because of the protected passer, and the rook is more active than the black's king. But at the same time, black really wants to play rook takes c3 check and throw down our king and take the third rank under control. What is really very important in Rook's endgames is to have active king and active rook, and as well support the passers. That's why Capablanca, who played here as white against Savile Tartakover, played here king g3, the only one winning approach. Because after rook c3, he goes with the king h4. And now he's linking his pieces between each other, and he wants to go straight forward. So rook goes to f3. It looks like black will take here with the check, then they can take on d4, but Capablanca prepared g6 on it. Now he wants to play king g5, king f6, and he wants to have a way better pieces than black and use the bad position of the black's king. So here positional advantage of white would be completely more valuable than material advantage of black. So after rook takes e4, king g5, if black will go rook takes d4, we can just play king f6, threatening the mate. And after, for example, king g8, I can go rook d7, and again I want to go rook d8 mate. And this pawns d and f5. Perfect umbrellas for our king, right? And our rook. So if black will go king e8 here, then I just can play g7, rook g4, rook h8, following the g8 queen, winning absolutely. Extra rook is extra rook. That's why after king g5, black tried to play rook e4, a bit more tricky. Still king f6, because we use as the f5 pawn as an umbrella, and we want to do the checkmate. King g8, rook g7. I love how Capablanca is technical. Now he really wants to push the king of black to go straight to the corner, and after he just takes the pawn. He threatening the checkmate, so rook a8, and now we can go king f5. What do we see? We equalized the material, but we saved all our benefits, I mean the passer. So after all, black played rook f4, king f6, rook f4, king f5, and straight after rook g4, Capablanca was really perfect till to the end, g7 check. The point is that now, in case of rook g7, the pawn endgame would be absolutely winning, right? I want to go here and move my pawn. So that's why his opponent played king g8, but straight after rook a7, he can resign. Because after rook g1, king d5, I will show you an example line, I can easily win this game because of my extra material. So then I can hide my king on c8 and my d pawn is passing. So very nice example of Capablanca, how he used his positional advantage. Active pieces is key, is basement of Rook's endgames. Let's speak a bit about how to convert the material advantage into the victory. Here we are, and now we see the position from the World Chess Championship between Alexander Alekhine, who played here as white, and Jose Raul Capablanca. White has extra pawn, looks winning, but it's not super easy because Capablanca showed here a very nice defending skills. Rook a4, for sure we must. To do this, we used to speak that the best position for the defending rook is behind the pawn, but now black's rook is not in the perfect way, so if the rook is going somewhere, then I can just play a6. This rook can support the pawn, and if I need, can protect my other pawns. Very nice position for the rook of the active side. Black by king f6, king f3, king f5, trying to activate the king. Very logical. King f3, h5. Remember, this pawn formation, f2, g3, h4, and for black f7, g6, h5 counts as the best pawn formation in the Rook's endgames. Practice just proved this for us. So king d3, trying to get away from c4 and b5 to our pawn. King d5, king c3, king c5, rook a2. Very useful and calm and technical move. Now we can protect the pawn on a and f at the same time, and after king b5 of black, it's not an attack to our rook. Black played king b5. Now basically what we are doing is we are using the principle of two weaknesses, the very important general principle how to win in chess. The point is that now black can't stop at the same time our passer and our attack to this side. So king goes d4. The idea that the pawn and game after this is absolutely winning for white because we will just take everything. This king is too far away to protect. Black used the best. Rook d6, king f5, rook e6, king f4, king a6. They switched the king with the rook. So this king stops the pawn, and this rook's trying to defend these pawns and makes a mess against this. Let's see how Alekhine played. King goes g5, very nice. We want to push our king to g7 because f7 is the basement of the black's pawn chain, so we're trying to attack it. Rook f5, king h6, rook f5. And here basically Alekhine played f4, so he still won, but I want to focus your attention on the line that was easier. King g7, rook f3, rook goes to d2. Now we need to sacrifice a bit because we want to play rook d6 and then after rook d6, rook f6, having a winning pawn and game. So after this, we can check here, check, king c3, rook f4. Absolutely winning position. It would be pawn and game in which white will collect all the pawns and win. Or after rook d3, I don't know, king f7, I will still take everything here, and that's absolutely winning for white still. So again, very important technique how to convert your material advantage. Don't forget about the principles of two weaknesses, right? It's still very important principle in chess. I hope you enjoyed my video and that was helpful for you. Don't forget to hit subscribe, press like to this video, and see you soon on my new episodes.